Of a recess or a holding period at least while we wait 2 weeks for the grand final. Our coaches tonight over in the West, the home of the grand final, Adam Simpson. Simo, great to have you back on 360.
Good evening, boys.
And Brett Ratten's with us in the studio, St Kilda coach. Rats,
How are you, fellas? Good?
What did you think of those prelims?
Well, I said it on Friday before the prelims and said this is the best weekend of footy. They're all tight games, and how far was I off the mark? 80-odd points, and it was unbelievable.
Simo, you're a veteran of 8 prelims for a 5-3 record as player and coach. They were pretty extreme.
Yeah, look, I think the history probably tells you they're not as close as they seem to be. It's funny how important the starts are in prelims. Momentum builds and you can lose it pretty quick. So, yeah, two completely different ends of the spectrum on the weekend.
What impression were you left with particularly the 2 winners by the end of it?
Well, look, when you get to those prelims, you really just want to play your own brand in your own way, and you do a bit of work with the opposition, but essentially you do what you've been trying to do all year. So I think they're going with confidence. Both teams look healthy as well, and the good players are playing well. So it's going to be a really tough game to pick for the grand final. But yeah, the way they both went about it, you could sort of tell that they're in the sweet spot, which is very important this time of year.
So you've been through it before yourself, Simo. How do you put great performances like that into perspective when you know there's another big challenge coming in a couple of weeks' time?
Well, it's brand new this time around because there's 2 weeks to hand.
Yeah.
So, and I'm trying to think which club needs the break, and you probably say the Bulldogs who've been going every week, and whether that's an advantage or not, you just don't know. But it's a different angle now because you make the grand final, suddenly you get into, I need tickets, I need families, I need to set up everything, and then all of a sudden it's grand final parade, and then you play. But there's a bit of mind games going to happen the next 10 days. I mean, they're both over here, both in hotels, but how they manage training, what do you do on Friday at main training is going to be really interesting with how hard do you really want to go. So all those things are to play out, and whoever handles that best will obviously handle it better on grand final day.
How tight's the margin call on what to do physically with the team across 2 weeks?
Well, they're both two very good in the contested ball situation, so I don't think they have to do too much work there, but it'll probably just be, can you get Stephen May up and through the 2 weeks to make sure he's right? For Melbourne, that'll be pretty important. He's just a key player. So the health of the list, as Simo said, is probably the most critical, but you still need to do a little bit. You just can't think you can waltz through and have the 2 weeks off. You still got to do some of the work because some of the habits that you've formed through the year are pretty strong, and you need to continue that and play your brand and play the way you want to go about it. But the contested ball was a highlight for both teams on the weekend.
I imagine there'll be no lockout sessions, no secret training sessions because everything's exposed. Would you want to have one of those prior to the grand final over a 2-week break? Is there something you'd love to work on with the players that no one else sees?
Maybe, this will be interesting because Simo could probably talk about it going into a grand final as a coach, but you've got 2 weeks. Do you sort of overcoach a little bit with some of the strategies to think this could be the strategy last time we played them to get the advantage? But, they're smart coaches. Bevo's won a flag and Goody's been involved in premierships as a player, so I think they'll take it pretty easy, but you could be an element of overcoaching through this 2 weeks.
Could you drive yourself nuts, Simo?
Well, I don't know about closed session because they're both training at Mineral Resources Park, which is our home ground. So I'm literally looking out of my office and watching Melbourne train. So I actually, I did cast an eye on both teams last week. They prepared for the different games and 2 completely different models, I suppose. I saw Melbourne in the first week. Not that I, over-scouted. I just, couldn't help but look. But they trained really hard building into their weekend off. And then the Bulldogs were the opposite, prepping for Port in their last build-up. So closed sessions are almost impossible these days, depending on your training environment. I know at where we train, anyone can come up and watch. It's really difficult to have cameras or crowd not watching. So to be honest, I think that's sort of a bit old school now, that the training sessions, it's less about strategy and more about, just getting confidence and doing what you do well.
So as an observer, Simo, watching the teams prepare, is there anything that you can pick up out of that? Anything that you might take away from it?
Oh, it's really difficult. Hard to not try and compare the standards of training to our standards. But I really didn't look that hard at what they did. But how you prepare for it. I suppose you got to try and keep it as simple as possible. You do need to obviously look at the opposition to a certain degree, but a lot of that and you would have played them once or twice throughout the year, and you would have gone back to last time you played and what worked and what didn't work. And in the end, you just go out there and try and play your own way. So, yep, you can over-strategise, especially if you think there's an advantage to be had in the coach's box. But essentially, I think both teams will just play their own way.
What did you think of the standard that we saw from the two of them?
Oh, they were very powerful, full of running. They both moved the ball well, and their scoring efficiency early was unbelievable. You know, both first quarters, high scoring from those two teams. But I was still just marvelled at their contest work, how hard they went and how many times they won it. And it wasn't sometimes around the stoppages, it was the contest-to-contest work that both teams did it so well.
Could you separate the two performances? Did either impress you even more than the other?
Well, it might be the health of some of the key players. You know, Keith coming back and May getting up, that might be the difference to get an advantage, because Norton was unbelievable. I thought his contested work in the air was something where the Bulldogs got an advantage, but it'll probably come down to the midfield, the supply, Petrarca, Oliver, Gawn's influence versus, Martin and English, and then Bond, McRae, the list goes on, Libba, who can win that supply. So,
Simo, how do the losers recover from those performances?
I'd say it starts with beer, ends with scotch. Look, I think what normally happens when you get knocked out of a final, which has happened a lot to anyone who's been around the game for a while, is you do, from a coaching point of view, it does take a few days to soak in what happened. And we had the Bulldogs in 2016 in the first final where when they won the premiership, and they blew us away by 50-odd points on our home deck. And you're a bit shell-shocked. You reflect on training and you think, geez, we had a bye going into that game last time as well. And you think, what did we do wrong with our prep, and why weren't the boys playing at their best to start with? And so you self-reflect, and then obviously the players need to take some accountability as well. And yeah, it's really hard to get out of that cave. It takes at least 3 or 4 days before you want to read anything or look at anything, and then you barely watch the next week of finals, and then you sort of come out of it by the end of it, and you start to move on. That's what happened to me anyway.
We just saw some shots of Ken Hinkley sort of rubbing his temples, shielding his eyes. Is that the worst part of coaching, when you're sitting in the coach's box and you're getting absolutely nothing from any of your players and you feel completely helpless?
Yes, you are. And you're trying to think, what can you do to help? How can I help the situation? How can I stop momentum? What are the things we've done in the past that's worked? What players are getting off the chain offensively for the opposition? So all these things are running through your mind. And Rats, I know he's been working through this as well. How do you stop momentum is a really big thing with the modern game. There's new rules come in place with the centre bounce rule, and you only concede a few goals out of the middle, and it becomes really difficult to stop momentum, which is great for the scoring of the game. It's really difficult for the coaches. So you really rely on your leaders out in the ground.
Yep. So how deeply are you reviewing performances like that? If your season ended that way, is it let's review it and move on and try and forget about it, or is it something that you use as motivation throughout the pre-season?
Well, that's where teams have bounced, haven't they? They've had a finals performance where, back when, 94 for us at the Blues, we lost the 2 finals and straight out, and we played in the 93 grand final, lost 94 straight out, and then won 95. And I think it was the motivation that we got from, the 94 season that really helped us. And Simo was there with the Hawks too, in 12. I think it was the driver behind the 13 premiership was really the Hawks got beaten in 12, and those players were hell-bent on getting that flag, and they worked so hard through that break.
So you can work the other way as well, Rats. We lost the 15 grand final we got humiliated really by 50 points, and I don't think we recovered too well for the next season, and trying to work out how to address I think when you lose by a tight margin, you can sort of manage that and work with it, but when you get blown away, and you say, oh, geez, we've got to get a harder edge, or we've got to do this differently in pre-season, and it's all based on sort of one game.
Yep.
If you don't get that right, sometimes it takes a few years to bounce back. So I'm sure, both Geelong and Port will work through what they need to. But yeah, it's an important couple of weeks after the season.
So how critical is it to work out what to front up to, what to own, what to react to, and So what not to underreact, what not to overreact?
Well, that's the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you can overreact, and as Simo said, that one performance, you can think, geez, we're not good at this and this, but then you go through the yearly stats and review it. Port have got, some outstanding patches through the year, and Geelong played some brilliant footy, but, where they go next is, one's an older list and one's a younger list, and Port brought all that youth in, so they'll have a different approach. So the next 6 months will be important for them.
How fine's the balance when you speak to the team in the rooms after you've just gone out in an insipid performance like that? How much do you have to hold your tongue and not completely destroy the players? But how much do you have to let them know that they've got to carry a lot of this responsibility? That must be a really fine balancing act.
Yeah, it is. We lost to Richmond last year in that final, and it was by about 20 odd points, and we played some all right football through the game, but it's about not overreacting when you've lost a final. Take a moment and have a measured approach, because it's not as bad as it seems. Well, when you lose by a big margin, it is. But the year, you've got to look at the whole year itself and what can they do to get back to that stage. That's where they need to look, and that's the hardest thing. We won a final, got knocked out, and we didn't even get to the finals this year, and that's our aim.
Simo, how are you finding the prospect of a grand final in your backyard and one that you can't be a part of? Is it vexed at all?
I'm very flat. I'm flat, boys. I know it's great for WA. We're embracing it. There's a lot of cashies available in the next couple of weeks. But that's the disappointing part for us. We underperformed this year. We didn't get a lot of things right, and we're disappointed about that. But when's this going to happen again? I'm sure Brisbane, to a lesser extent, they had a really good season last year. But your opportunity to play finals on your home deck is, no matter what, and a grand final is something that we would have cherished, and no doubt Fremantle the same. So not to be. It's actually interesting. The last 2 years with the games being played all over Australia, the home ground advantage is going to be really interesting going forward. Even finals in recent times. A lot of the away teams are getting up. It's and it used to be a really difficult challenge. It still is, mind you, but I think the adversity that clubs have gone through and the resilience that you've seen across the board has held everyone in better stead for interstate travel, and we're hoping that reflects on us in the future when we travel as well.
Just a quick one, Simo, the bye that's coming up. Aside from recovering players who need that time, is there any other reason why you'd want to buy between the prelim and the grand final?
That's a great question. Look, if you're a team that hasn't missed, that come from outside the top four, it's perfect. I would have thought Bevo would be, despite the injuries, just getting over a big campaign. They can decompress a little bit for the first few days, enjoy what they've achieved, and no doubt Melbourne will find their advantage on it too. But I get the feeling both clubs have got themes in the background, and how do you continue that message throughout the week? How do you follow it through on game day? All those things are interesting, but it's a new take on a prep for a grand final.
We'll keep our conversation going in a few moments' time. Adam Simpson and Brett Ratten with us on Coaches' Nights after the preliminary finals, and set up for couch. Gary Lyons over in the West. He'll join Jared, Jonathan and Nick as they pick over how it all unfolded and what comes next.
The Moment, brought to you by PointsBet.
My God, he's done it again! Oh, he's kicked his fourth! He has taken it to the absolute max! Max grabs it out of the ruck! No. Hurry, snap! Max is lighting the whole show up!
Gore takes it out of the ruck! You are kidding me! Party tricks from Big Max! And they look every bit like the Harlem Globetrotters.
A PB in a prelim for the skipper. Max Gore's taking the piss at Optus Stadium.
Yes, that was actually the most accurate special comments that there were. Adam, you know a thing about astounding ruckman. What did you think about Max's game on Friday night?
Oh, he had a unicorn moment. That's how rare it was.
Yes.
But to do what he did, captain of the side, such a big game. And we sort of knew he's got it in him too. I think he always threatens to... He supports behind the play a lot as well, and his ability to chop out down back. But going forward and doing what he did, that's something that I'm sure you'll never forget, and, he may never repeat. But, yeah, great effort.
Inspiring leadership, Rats.
Oh, it was amazing. He just led from the front, and that running goal reminded me of Justin Madden at Waverley, I think, back against Adelaide. To see someone 200-odd centimetres take a bounce and put it through, unbelievable.
Spectacular, wasn't it? It's interesting we're talking about captains, because I guess that's a discussion facing both of you gentlemen. What happens next year? Start with you, Rats. Darren Geary probably ready to hand it over full time, is he? Or is that being presumptuous?
Yeah, that's probably a little early. We've probably got to have the conversations, but Steele's performance the idea was to have Geary there to support Steele and being a young captain, and Geary's leadership is outstanding. But that will be the conversation probably through the break. Does Geary just hand it over to Steele and just be the solo captain now? But
he's handled it pretty well, hasn't he?
He has. He's done everything right. He's grown on the field and off the field. It's not just been his performance on the field. I think as a leader, he's had a great season, led from the front. He won the most courageous. He's just, when we've been down, he's stood up, and that's what good leaders do.
What about Shannon Hearn? Simo breaks through the 300-game barrier. How's his body? How's he holding up?
Yeah, he's had a pretty good season. I think his body let him down a few times, and same with Josh Kennedy, who played, I think, 18-odd games. So, yeah, we're working through with those guys, being really respectful of where they're at, where the club's at. But we think there's still some good football left in them. So we need to work through how they feel, and we'll go from there. So there's still plenty of time.
So just talking about some of those players, Luke Shuey continues to cop a heap of injuries. Is the captaincy an issue at all there when he, I guess, struggling to keep his body fit for gameplay week in, week out?
Oh, look, there's no doubt you're hampered as a leader if you're not playing. So he's doing everything he possibly can to get his body right. So it's really, we haven't seen the best version of Luke for a couple of years from a performance point of view, but from a leadership point of view, what he does off field and how he carried himself is first class. But what always completes a player is leading from the front, leading with your actions. And unfortunately, we've just been a little bit hampered the last 18 months with some of our better players not quite getting up and getting that synergy right. So Luke understands that, but it's in good nick at the moment. So he's ready to go. He's already started training, believe it or not. So yeah, we'll see how he goes next year.
You've added to the coaching stocks today, Simo. What are you, when you assess a coaching staff and derivative ideas, experience, what were you searching for that led to today's announcements?
Yeah, really exciting for us. And we lost a couple of really experienced coaches in Adrian Hickmott and Jamie Graham. But we grow our own coaches a fair bit over my time, and to get a couple of experienced guys with fresh ideas and a bit of IP from other clubs. But overall, they're good people, and they've been in the industry long enough to really add value. So yeah, we're looking forward to meeting both those boys. We're maybe on the lookout for another one as the weeks go by. So yeah, time for a bit of a change. We'll use it as an opportunity to reset not only our players but our staff as well.
Hey Simo, you mentioned Josh Kennedy before. Just want to pop back there if I can. He's been brilliant since going over to West Coast, and I love watching him play. What's his thirst for the game? Is it still at a high level, and how do you see his involvement going forward with his body and the way it is?
Yeah, look, he like I said, I think he played 18 games this year, and managed in the right way. I still think there's some really good performances left in him. It's up to him to a certain degree, and up to us to a certain degree. So we need to get together and work through that. We haven't done that yet, but his body's standing up pretty well, and same with Shannon. So yeah, we need to work through those situations with the list as well and where we're heading. So that's still to be worked through, but it's looking more likely than unlikely.
And Rats, just as we finish, the grand finalists are from 7th and 9th last year, and you sort of hatched the idea of the why not us idea. You're building on that?
Yeah, well, we finished the second half pretty strong. I think, by the stats, we're about 7th on the ladder and a fairly healthy percentage. We got a few things right. We didn't win all our games, but we thought the momentum was there, and we think we can capitalise on that, and that's what we have to do.
Good of you to come in. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Simo, will you go to the grand final?
Yes. I'm hoping to get some sort of corporate package deal where we had a couple of tickets. I've got 4 kids, and my wife doesn't really care about it all. But yeah, I'm trying to look to cash in a little bit this week, boys. So I'm open for business.
Thanks for letting us into the kitchen. Good man.
Thanks, boys.
Coaches Night on 360. Tomorrow night, it's Players Night. Adam Treloar is heading to the grand final. So he will join us from over in Perth and put us inside the Bulldogs camp. And Jack and Eddie will be together at the desk.